Thank you, André, for joining this interview. I'm really happy that we could make this work and meet online. So we're going to have a little bit of a deep dive into some of the topics of the upcoming conference, Canadian upcoming conference that will be held in Ontario and online this coming July. The theme will be transforming together in peace, so reconnecting humanity and living Earth. So perhaps just starting with my first question, how does the specific combination of voices in this conference, so we're going to have a conservation biologist, Tom Musto, an Indigenous leader and poet, Chief Stacey Laforme, and a Benedictine monk, Father Lawrence. How are these sort of different voices going to help us move past a sort of a purely intellectual understanding of ecology toward a more soulful, integrated way of inhabiting the world?
Yeah, thanks, Paola, for the question. I believe our conference is happening exactly at the right time. If we take a look at the world in 2026, there are several alarming clouds on the horizon. Parts of our world are dangerously reverting to isolationism. There's a deeply held belief that our economy does not depend on nature. Even worse, the belief that humans are separate from nature and that consumption and growth leading towards human output can continue without regards to planetary boundaries. I think a more soulful, integrated way of inhabiting the world must start with our relationship with the divine. Humans have had that relationship since the beginning of times. My son at the moment is reading the Odyssey by Homer, which is considered the first ever novel written. And in that book, normal people rely on insights from supernatural beings like fairies to guide them through life decisions. So I believe that the purpose of every human being on this planet is a greater awareness of the connection we have with the divine, call it God or spiritual, the higher intelligence, whatever you want to call it. In the same way, the living earth is yearning for connections with humans, and humans are yearning for connections with each other. But ignorance of our need for connection, coupled with the attachment to the ego and the physical material world, makes us react in aggressive ways to these pleas for greater connections. So enter our speakers. So our keynote speaker, Tom Musto, is a conservation biologist turned filmmaker and writer, and specializing in stories where people and nature meet. He literally dove into the science of studying the language of whales. Not the parts of the UK, but the animal. Technological improvements have helped him fine-tune his methods to learn more about how they communicate with each other and what we can learn from them. He'll share his fascinating discoveries with us and lead us into a meditation surrounding with the sound of whales. And a second notable speaker at our conference is Chief Stacey Laforme. Chief Laforme is former chief of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations in Ontario, a respected storyteller, poet, and advocate for leadership, reconciliation, and environmental stewardship. I once heard a famous author, Michel Tremblay in Quebec, say that creative writing is not born out of plentiful abundance or luxury. It is really born out of pain, scarcity, and struggle. Chief Laforme has certainly lived through his share of struggle in life, and his poems and short stories are extremely touching and soulful. So in addition to these two speakers, we have, of course, our very own Father Lawrence Freeman to expand on the theme, transforming together in peace. He has demonstrated with his travels, sharing the seeds of meditation around the world, that meditation crosses countries, cultures, traditions, and ethnicities. It is really a universal practice aimed at seeking a more soulful, integrated way of inhabiting the world through the proper alignment of the ego.
Wow, that's an incredible mix of minds. This kind of leads me to my next question, which I'm going to ask you is, and it's sort of in relation, probably more broadly to, I guess it's very strongly connected with meditation, because often when we meditate, we put silence into our mind, and we put a bit of quieting of the ego in a way.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel that? What was your thoughts as to how we practically begin to quiet the ego, so that we can sort of encounter a sort of more than human world with reverence and clarity needed for so much needed true peace?
Yes, that's another great question, Paola. And without meaning to sound facetious, I think the how is really simple. I tell people I can teach them meditation in 5 minutes, but as Father Lawrence says, it is the experience of meditation day in and day out that is the teacher. And the teacher will eventually quiet the ego by experience, and many people have experienced that as well. People start adopting meditation as a way of life once they realize that it is not separate from their everyday life. There's a direct link between your 20 or 30 minutes of meditation twice a day and your everyday life. So how do we quiet the ego during meditation? Well, John Main left us with a simple practice of repeating a word throughout the meditation from beginning to the end, while adopting a proper posture and remaining still. This is helpful, but what happens after meditation ends? What happens when we must interact with our spouse, our children, our coworkers, parishioners, strangers on the subway? How do we quiet the ego during those times? Well, I believe it has to do with adopting an attitude of humility, developing listening skills, accepting that we do not know the answers sometimes, accepting that God's ways are higher than our ways, and respecting our strangers, enemies, as creation of God, just as we are. But everything I'm telling you now does not happen overnight. Nothing really happens in the meditation session. I mean, nothing. Things start happening over time, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. But the important thing, and maybe the last attitude that is really important to adopt in meditation, is fidelity. Fidelity to yourself, to your loved ones, fidelity in the presence of God. We must accept that there is more to life than just the physical and the seen.
Easier said than done, then.
Yes.
My third point and question is more connected to the conference. So the Canadian conference I was talking about will be held in July. Sort of will focus on this idea of contemplative awareness becoming the ground of ethical action. How do you think that this can be the synergy? There can be a synergy between, I think one of the speakers coming from this indigenous storytelling background, the biological wonder, the biologist, the conservation biologist, and Christian contemplation. How do you think there can be this sort of synergy that can provide a foundation for reconciliation, and especially in relation to the environment?
Yes, you're asking me tough questions, Paola, today. Just like I said, one meditation session will not solve everything, and I believe one conference will not solve everything, but it will be, I believe, the platform for further discussion and hopefully growth in number of people interested in contemplative practices like meditation. For Canada, the question of reconciliation is extremely important. I mean, it's not unique to Canada. There are other countries that are dealing with relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people and the history of those relationships. But in Canada, we take this very at heart. I spoke earlier about how creative writing is not born out of plentiful abundance and luxury. And I'm certain Chief Laforme will speak to the salvation aspects of suffering because it shows in his writing. I'm not saying this to belittle or somewhat romanticize our history of colonial oppression in Canada towards Indigenous people, but it is salvatory for both nations to learn from each other, learn from each other's pains and suffering in order to transcend and free ourselves from mental slavery, just to quote Bob Marley. And this can only happen through conscious and respectful dialogues, starting at the ground level between members of our meditation communities and members of indigenous communities. We have 100 meditation groups across Canada, meeting every week with either online or in person, with an average of 10 people per group. It is not a far-fetched idea to think about some of these groups getting together with indigenous groups in their area, sharing about their way of life, spiritual traditions, contemplative practices, their relationship with the Creator, and their shared dreams about a better life for their children. These conversations could expand into practical conversations about involving decision makers about biodiversity preservation, protection of the environment, or development of renewable energy for the future. And the aim of all this, I believe, is to realize that at the end of the day, there's not that much difference between our two communities. The dualistic view of our nation eventually disappears, just like in meditation, eventually the ego disappears, to make room for peace and peaceful cohabitation in respect of our mutual differences.
All right. Thank you, André. It was really pleasant to work with you and to listen to a little bit more about this conference. So if anyone wants to find out more, they can take a look at WCCM Christian Community Canadian website.
It's open. I want to mention, Paola, that this is open for people to attend in person in Toronto, Canada, at Victoria College on the beautiful grounds of the University of Toronto, July 24th to 26th. And it's also available to access online. And there's a special discount for students. We're trying to target young adults to attend the conference, and students have a special 50% discount for online or in-person participation.
Perfect. Great.